Hi, I am Melody Powell. As Michelle said, I've just started working with ALLFIE officially. I first got involved a year ago, actually, at their AGM. So this is kind of like my 1 year birthday of ALLFIE, which is kind of nice. I'm just gonna give a brief overview of my journey through education and my experience of the framework. So I was born 20 years after the Warnock Report was published and 17 years after the Education Act of 1981. So you would have thought it would have been smooth sailing. No, it wasn't. I'm going to be quite open and honest to give the best picture of young people's perspective of education as a disabled person. So just be warned. I began my mainstream education journey in 2002, and my first nursery had no support at all. I was forced to sit on the floor despite not being able to get back up because they said it would strengthen my legs. I was left to go to the toilet on my own and fell over and was luckily helped by another 4-year-old at the nursery. The next time I wanted to go, I was too scared to ask for help, so I just sat there and wet myself. That was my last day at that nursery. Fortunately, my next nursery had an amazing Senko who knew all about SEND framework, and she set up everything that I needed to start at primary school. Although, unfortunately, I didn't have an official diagnosis. So, therefore, there was no evidence that my condition wouldn't improve. So, I couldn't get a statement. So, I was issued a note in lieu in October 2002, which was great. But that meant there was no legal obligation for anyone to provide resources for me. So I was moved on to something called School Action Plus, which again isn't a legal obligation, more advisory things that they should be doing. And as far as I'm aware, no advice was sought regarding my condition from a professional. It was all down to my parents to make sure that I had some sort of help. And although they managed to do that, I still didn't have a fully inclusive experience. I was still segregated within subjects as I was made to work around the barriers rather than the barriers being removed or minimalized. For example, in music, everyone would be learning to play the recorder, but I would be given a triangle. I felt like a toddler being given a toy controller while everyone else played. I could never inconvenience anyone else's learning, but they could all inconvenience mine. Like Jess said earlier, I was expected to achieve the handwriting skills to the level of my peers. Otherwise, I wouldn't get the ceremony of getting a pen license like everyone else. And I was really penalized for not being able to. And I did have a TA at school, which was great. But when it came to the out of school activities like field trips and the week away in year 6, I was forced to take my mum. So I stuck out quite badly because no one was allowed to do personal care when they weren't on the school premises. I then received a statement as I entered secondary education, as I finally had a formal diagnosis. Yet my mum still had to support me, as staff were still not allowed to help with personal care. She had to come to school daily to enable me to use the toilet and she had to still come on the field trips. Not many 16-year-olds want their mum hanging around when they're trying to be cool at school and fit in. Unfortunately, the first secondary school I went to, they didn't quite understand what it meant to provide resources and support disabled people. Because their answer to everything was, well, the last disabled girl we supported her fine. Great. That's not me though. They couldn't distinguish between individual people. So most of my TAs were essentially mum helpers who were learning on the job with no formal training prior to working with me. This also meant that they rarely had knowledge of the subjects I was studying as I got further into the education system. So I had to explain everything to them before they would write something down for me. Lucy Mason actually wrote something that resonated with me and perfectly explained the hassle of getting good support. It was called My History of Helpers, which I discovered later in my university studies. I fortunately moved to a better secondary school who actually asked me what I needed. Unfortunately, I couldn't answer because I had never been asked that before. I didn't really know how to advocate for my rights and what I needed. So I eventually ended up being educated from home by the pupil referral unit, as a lot of other disabled young people ended up receiving their education from, as I couldn't make the full 9 till 3 school hours every day. And this carried on into my college. I was required to do 2 A levels or nothing. There was no in between. So I ended up withdrawing from education. I then took a break for learning for 2 years because I was tired of fighting just to learn while everyone else had it so easy. And the sad thing is, nobody really questioned that decision. Everyone kind of went, yeah, it's hard to get special requirements and assistance. Yeah, you can take time off, which felt wrong to me. I wasn't missed. I didn't feel like, I don't know, I felt like they didn't value me gaining an education. But once I'd recovered from the ordeal of education as a disabled person, I went back to study with the Open University, where I gained a certificate of higher education in childhood and youth studies, where I began learning about the formal SEND framework myself, so that I could begin my journey into campaigning for true inclusive education. As you can see, my experience of provision has been quite inconsistent, with each organisation taking the SEND framework into their own hands. And many of my disabled peers had similar journeys. We still clearly have a long way to go, but I know that with all of our campaigning and all of ALLFIE's amazing work, that we will get there. Thank you.